welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you here at this, the first of a two-part webinar series. Today we're going to focus on herons, egrets, ducks, marsh birds, and seabirds. And whether you're a beginner birder, intermediate, or advanced, I hope that today will be helpful to you as we are just launching our Caribbean Waterbird Census for 2021. So we're really excited to have with us today as our main facilitator, Jeff Gerbracht. Some of you know Jeff. He is the lead architect and software engineer at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where he manages the development of birds of the world and the infrastructure for eBird. In addition, his interests, he has a lifelong interest in conservation, birds in the Caribbean, and this has led him to become deeply involved with BirdsCaribbean and various bird monitoring programs throughout the Caribbean. Jeff was an original team member who designed and developed the Caribbean Waterbird Census and protocols. He was a co-author on the CWC manual, and he has facilitated and presented a number of CWC training workshops with us. Additionally, he's a co-author of the complete checklist of birds of the West Indies. So many of you know Jeff from past training workshops and conferences. We're really excited and grateful to have him with us as an expert in bird ID and teacher. And so Jeff, it's all yours. Take it away. Welcome.
All right. I think I'm going to request remote control.
Okay.
Which I think I just did.
Yep, I approved. You should be good to go.
All right. Let's see if this works. There we go. Did I skip a slide?
Not sure. Go back one. No, you might be good. You're good.
Okay. All right. Couldn't tell. So today, as Lisa said, we're going to talk about water birds mainly. Birds that spend at least a significant part of their life history reliant on water in one form or another. Most of it's going to be, we're not covering shorebirds today, but ducks, grebes, rails, herons, things like that. Let's see. Yeah, there's a little lag when I click, so I'll just have to make sure I don't click twice. For those of you who are new or newish to bird identification, there's kind of four key things. These aren't the only things we think about when we're trying to identify a bird, but these are some of the things that we keep in mind. Size and shape of the bird, behavior, what the bird is actually doing can sometimes be very important. Overall color and what we call field marks, which are specific things about the color or shape of a bird. Habitat and where the bird lives. The actual range of the bird can also be very important in helping us identify these birds. Trying to move forward, there it goes. So I'm going to start off with heron, egrets, and other wading birds, of which this is one here. If you know what it is, feel free to put it in the chat. Generally, herons and egrets are long-legged birds. They have long necks. They're kind of adapted for walking in shallow to deepish water. And they have these long pointed bills that are almost like daggers that they use for generally catching fish. They're mostly freshwater. There are a couple that will get into brackish and even saltwater, but they're mostly restricted to freshwater. Essential information for identifying these is often the bill color, as we see here, neck, belly, and body color, and leg color. Those are three pretty key things to really look at when you can see a heron or egret, as well as the overall size. Lisa, are the slides changing for you?
Not at the moment. Hold on.
Are you on essential information?
Okay.
There it goes.
Now? Okay.
Yeah, okay. There seems to be a lag, which I'm not sure what end it is, but we'll work through it.
Okay.
So if you know what this is, feel free to type into the chat. But what we notice here, thinking back of those things to look at for herons and egrets, is bill color. Can't quite see leg color in this photograph, but we do kind of get a sense of the bill color and the overall color and pattern of this bird. So as some people are mentioning, this is a great blue heron. And some of the key features for this bird are yellow bill, this bluish gray body color, which can sometimes turn a little bit reddish on the neck. On the front of the neck, it has a white band down the front of the neck that is often streaked. And it has this very dark eyebrow and these little plumes coming off the back of the head. And I've tried to forward this to the next slide and it's not doing anything.
There we go.
Are you doing it now, Lisa?
No, I'm not doing anything.
That's weird. Okay.
Just,
So this is, as I said, most herons and egrets are freshwater birds, as this one is. And here we can also see the yellowish legs, including the yellow bill. And those are pretty key field marks for this bird. This is the largest heron that exists in the West Indies. And some of these pictures here really nicely show this black shoulder patch too, which you can sometimes see. Not always, but sometimes. But again, the yellow bill, yellow legs, this black kind of big eyebrow with white underneath, and that general blue-gray coloration are key for this one. The next bird we're going to talk about, again, let's look at color, overall color, bill color, and leg color. We see the bill color on this is also yellow. The legs on this are black, and the full body here is white. Yep, some people already have it. It's interesting. I have to click 3 times for it to go to the next slide, but we'll, like I said, we'll manage that. This is a great egret. It's the second largest bird. It's almost in size, almost the same as a great blue heron. But again, we see this large dagger-like yellow bill, full white plumage, and black legs really define this. And then in the midst of breeding season, it gets this intense green color in the lores right between the bill and the eye. Really a pretty bird. The next one we're going to talk about here is probably a bit smaller than both the great blue heron and the great egret. Key features on this one, again, are the bill. We see on this one, the bill is actually two-colored, two-toned. Has a big base that is pinkish and a dark black tip, and then very dark legs. Kind of that same blue-gray coloration that we were seeing in the great blue heron, but this has this big kind of brickish red, very shaggy, you'll notice, neck. This is one of the herons and egrets that also their behavior is very distinctive. And this is one that moves into brackish and salt water. In fact, it spends most of it, or I would say all of its time, in brackish or salt water. So if you're in a freshwater pond, you're likely not to see this species. If you're on the coast, this may be the most likely heron and egret that you'll see. This is a reddish egret. They're very active in pulling their wings together, and they dance around. They literally jump around in the shallows, and they're very, very fun to watch. So if you see a very, very active egret running around, jumping around, it's most likely this bird, which is the reddish egret.
oops.
Oops.
Sorry about
Oh,
that.
wow.
That was my fault. Go back.
I'm gonna try. So you can really see on this one how pink that bill is at the base of the bill and that black tip. Young birds, they have the similar shape. They're just kind of a washed out coloring of the adult. And on a young bird, they have this black, very long dagger-like black bill and the black legs, but the black bill is only going to be solid black on a very young, immature bird. It's interesting, Reddish Egret also has 2 color morphs. It's one of the few herons and egrets that we have that do. We can still look for that same bill color and leg color though on these birds. It's that bright pink base of the bill with this black tip. Still has the very shaggy looking neck, even though it's all white. And the youngsters of the white morph also have that solid black bill and solid black legs and the same behavior. If you see a white heron bouncing around in the surf or in saltwater shallows, the reddish egret is what it's going to be. Another white egret that we have throughout the Caribbean is this one. This one's pretty distinctive. Also, again, we look at that bill color. Bill is black, but it has a bright yellow base or lores between the black and the eye. And the legs are mostly black. Sometimes they have yellow on the back end of the legs, but they have these bright yellow feet. They have shaggy looking plumes, especially in the breeding season, off the head and down the back. And this bird is the snowy egret. One of the most beautiful egrets, I think, that we find in the Caribbean. Again, look for that black bill, yellow at the base, black legs, yellow at the base, yellow at the feet, and these shaggy plumes coming down off the back of the head. Closely related to the snowy egret is actually egret that's coming in from Europe and Asia. It's very well established now in parts of the Lesser Antilles. Looks very similar to a snowy egret. Has those same black legs, yellow feet. But the base of the bill isn't bright yellow like it is in a snowy egret. It still has that black bill, but between the bill and the eye, it's more of a gray, bluish gray color as opposed to yellow. One challenge is in the breeding season, this patch of skin between the bill and the eyes does start to become yellowish, which makes identifying this bird more of a challenge, except that it has, instead of a bunch of shaggy plumes off the back of the head, it has these 2 long wire-like plumes off the back of the head. That's diagnostic for little egret compared to snowy. Another little egret that we have is the little blue heron. This one's interesting because as an immature, it's pure white. And then as it gets older, it starts to get these bluish gray and reddish feathers on the neck. So you can see individuals that are pure white. You can see individuals that are kind of a mixture of this white bird with dark feathers coming in, or a full adult here that has this dark blue-gray back and a little bit of a reddish on the neck that in certain light can make it look like a reddish egret. You also notice this also has the 2-toned bill, but it doesn't have that bright pink base that you see on a reddish egret. It's more of a blue-gray base with a black tip. And little blue herons tend to stick to fresh water and move into the brackish. So in brackish water, you might be able to see both little blues and reddish. The leg color on this is kind of a grayish green, a little bit of yellowish green. So the leg color will also separate little blue from reddish egret. But this is an interesting one because it starts off white and then turns dark as it becomes an adult. Another heron we have, it's about the same size as one of these smaller or mid-sized herons, I guess you would say, is the tricolored heron. It can also give the look, especially from the back, of a reddish or that little blue heron. It has that kind of blue-gray back and wings, a little bit of reddish on the neck. The bill color and the leg color, however, can help us separate them again. The bill color has a lot of yellow mixed in with a little bit of black, and the legs are a bright yellowish green. But if it's facing you, like down here, it's the only one we see that has this white belly and white vent, which is underneath the tail, compared with the reddish on the sides of the neck and the blue-gray on the back. This is also one of the freshwaters, and I see Emma says it's one of her favorites. I agree. It's one I enjoy finding. This is the cattle egret. It's a much shorter, shorter-legged heron than everything we've talked about so far. This one also is white. It's generally pure white most of the year. And during the breeding season, they can get these really interesting, pretty tan coloration to the crest, top of the head, and on the breast. But generally, it's a pure white bird with this bright yellow bill and these kind of darkish legs. It's much shorter necked and shorter legged, as I said, than most everything else. And it's often in big flocks. It's a pasture, more of a pasture bird. They follow cattle around in fields. They eating insects. So you don't see them nearly as often in the water or ponds as you will the others. They do mix in the breeding with the other birds in big rookeries, so they will nest with the other herons, but generally in feeding, they feed in different habitats. So if you see a bunch of white herons out in a pasture, cattle egret is your go-to for that identification. So really quickly, which one is the great egret? We'll see if people remember. A, B, or C? Seeing lots of good answers sweeping by. And take a stab at identifying A and C as well. Looks like everybody's putting in B. Good. So to just go through these real quickly. A, that big, long, dagger-like, knife-like black bill, black legs, pure white body. This is a young reddish egret, a young white morph of the reddish egret. This one with that yellow bill, all white body, black legs is great egret. Then we move over to the right. Here we have this black bill, yellow lores, black legs, yellow feet. And I think we can tell that these aren't really wiry. They're shaggy, very plumy feathers off the back of the head. So this one's a snowy egret. Which one here is the reddish egret? Man, this is fantastic. Seeing lots of A's go by. That's correct. This bright pink base to the bill, black tip, very shaggy neck. This is the adult white morph of the reddish egret. This one in the center, again, is snowy with these shaggy plumes off the back and bright yellow lores with a black bill. This one is very blue-gray, but again, sometimes these birds will shade into yellow on the lores as well. They have these two wiry plumes off the back. So this is a little egret. This one's from the intro slide. Boy, when you get a good look at these, they are a beautiful, beautiful bird. I think there's a second image. Yes. These are the green heron. You may wonder why they're called green heron. It's not necessarily obvious from all the photos, but the back often in good sunlight can give a very strong greenish cast. This is one of the smallest herons we have, or the smallest heron. We have bright yellow legs, kind of this dark but not black bill that can have light yellow underneath. This reddish neck, which is very streaked on the sides and on the throat, kind of gives us a little bit of a look like the tricolored heron, but it doesn't have that white breast and belly. And it also has this dark cap, which can raise into this nice crest. And it has this very loud sound. I don't know if we can hear it. Kind of a co, co, co. You may be hard to hear on that recording, I can't tell. But it's like a kyop, which is a very distinctive call if you hear it from the marsh. Looked like Emma wasn't hearing it. I know Lisa is there, that go, go, go. That. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa, for turning that up. Another of our heron egret group is actually called a little bittern. These are pretty shy birds. They stick to freshwater vegetation. They're often very hard to see, or you might see them just right on the edge of the vegetation, especially early in the morning or late at the evening. Or you might see them flying by. They have a very distinctive pattern when they're flying. They have this dark band across the flight feathers and this dark band across the wing where it connects to the body. Yellow legs, kind of a yellowish bill with a dark dusky top. Very buffy brown, white, and almost a very, very dark brown pattern on their body. And they have these long tan streaks on a white throat and breast. These are about the same size, maybe a little smaller than the green heron. Again, they're actually probably fairly common throughout the West Indies, but certainly in the Greater Antilles, but they're migratory, so they move north, but they really like to stay hidden in vegetation. So this is one of the harder ones to see, as opposed to most of the other herons and egrets we've talked about that are really not shy and do a lot of their foraging out in the open. So this is the yellow-crowned night heron. There are actually two night herons. And you'll notice on the night herons, these bills are kind of long and dagger-like, but they're really robust. They have really thick bills. They're adapted more to, instead of eating fish, they're generally crab eaters. So they need that extra strength in the bill to catch and crack crabs. So this is the yellow-crowned night heron. It has one of its distinctive features. It has this whitish yellow on top of the head, and then a big black band through the eye, a white stripe under the eye, and then kind of this black on the throat, and then this gray body coming into streaked wings and yellowish legs. These are most often seen right at dawn or dusk or at night around places on the coast that are lit, like docks and things like that. They really like to forage on the beach and around docks. The youngster here, the young of the night herons can be very difficult to identify. You'll notice this one has a bill color very similar to the adult. It's pretty much all dark. And the other key feature for yellow-crowned night heron juveniles is these spots on the wings are pretty numerous and small. And if we compare that with the black-crowned night heron juvenile, you'll see they're on this juvenile, they're much more elongated and teardrop shaped. And the bill of the black-crowned night heron, which is this one, has pretty much a dusky bill, but the lower mandible is almost all yellow. It has extensive yellow on it. The best thing probably for immature night herons is to get a picture, because they can be very difficult to identify in the field. The adult, however, is pretty straightforward. Has a black crown, hence the name black-crowned night heron. This bright red eye, and then just white, gray, and this very dark, almost black back. And we'll give a little recording playback of this too. It goes there, wow, and that's pretty distinctive. If you have a chance to really listen to the calls of yellow-crowned and black-crowned, they are distinctive enough that you can also identify them by call. in the evening. So quick quiz. Which one's the black-crowned night-heron? Seeing lots of B's coming through, which is great. A few A's. So remember, yellow crown has this light crown, and then it is basically, think of it as having two black stripes through a whitish head, maybe one way to think of it, right? It's kind of a whitish yellow and then black, white, and then black. Whereas the black crown just have this big black cap on a grayish white head and body. Very good. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. These also fall into the or habitually are very similar to the herons and egrets, but you'll notice these don't have those long dagger-like bills like we were seeing with pretty much everything else that we've covered so far. So these two birds called Ibis, they have very long curved bills, which helps them probe in the mud for invertebrates. There's two species that commonly occur in the West Indies, the white ibis, which is white, and then it has this bright red face and beginning of a red bill that goes to black and generally reddish legs. But the key here is it's got that long curved bill and a white body. Immatures start off a little bit brown, but they quickly begin to get white feathers in, so they have this very mottled look for an immature white ibis. Glossy ibis, on the other hand, is dark, and in good sunlight, it has very iridescent, glossy feathers. It has a reddish look to the head and neck that you can really see in this flying bird, and then greenish wings. But again, if you see pretty much an all dark bird with this long curved bill, we're going to be looking at a glossy ibis. Whereas if you see the white bird with this long curved bill, it'll be the white ibis. Another bird that occurs especially in the Greater Antilles. It's actually a close relative of the cranes. So it has a really cool call, which I'll play right now. And you more often hear it than see it. Oops, go back. There's really nothing else that sounds like that. And if you see one of these, it's also very distinctive. It kind of has a curved bill, which is a little bit reminiscent of the ibis, but it's not nearly as long, slender, or strongly curved. And it's yellowish, especially at the base. But it's really this dark brown bird that has all of these white feathers that form this really cool streaking pattern on the neck, and then that pattern kind of spreads out over the body into these longer white feathers. This is a freshwater bird. Often they like to hide, so you hear them much more often than you see them. But if you do see them, they're generally right along the edge of the vegetation. So in that way they're similar to the least bittern that we were looking at before. So look for these along the edge of vegetation in freshwater swamps and marshes. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and switch from herons and egrets to a bunch of birds that like to swim. Ducks, grebes, and some other marsh, duck-like marsh birds. So on a duck, we're less interested in bill color, but bill shape helps. General body shape can help. One of the key things to think about often, especially with ducks, is where is the white? When you see a duck in the field, look for white. Where is that? And what's the pattern of the white on a duck? We'll start off here with a real quiz. Which ones of these are ducks, or how many ducks are there in this picture? The hint might be, well, which ones have a duck-like bill? So when we look at the names of these, well, none of them are actually called ducks, but the blue-winged teal here and the northern shoveler here are both ducks. The least grebe is in the grebe family. And then this is an American coot, which is closely related to gallinules, and has very different feet. The feet of the coot have evolved very differently from ducks. Whereas ducks have webbing between all their toes, American coot has these little flaps, like 3 or 4 flaps on each toe that fold out when it swims in the water. It really is an interesting adaptation for swimming. Oop. Jumped ahead there somehow. Try to get back. So this is one of the whistling ducks, or what used to be called tree ducks. They're a very long-legged and long-necked set of ducks. They roost often in trees. Most of them are to a certain extent nocturnal. So during the day, they're found roosting in trees, which is why they used to be called tree ducks. This one's a West Indian whistling duck. We can identify that from the other whistling ducks by this whitish cheek here with the brown cap, kind of this mottled into gray on the lower neck, and then all of these dark speckles on the breast and belly that you can really see especially on these birds in the photos on the right. And this is one of Lisa's favorite ducks, so if you can hear that. One of the reasons why they're called whistling ducks, because they really do whistle. So this is one of the other whistling ducks. Again, these long legs for a duck, long neck for a duck, but a very, very different body pattern compared to the West Indian whistling duck that we were just seeing. Adults here of this one have bright red bills, this eye that really stands out because this white eye ring, kind of this stripe down the top of the head and the neck on a gray head, solid brown body, and what you can't see it completely, but this black belly. And these are called black-bellied whistling-ducks. And they really have this dark black belly compared to the brown and chestnutty breast going into a gray head. And in flight, you'll see they have these big white wing patches. But one of the I think these are the, sorry Lisa, but I think these are my favorite whistling ducks. I just love the red bill and the eye, how it stands out on these birds. There's a third whistling duck that is more rare in the West Indies, but it can certainly be seen, especially in the Greater Antilles. This is a Fulvous Whistling-Duck. Does not have that white cheek that you'll see on the West Indian whistling-duck. Doesn't have the red bill. It's just got a gray bill. It really is kind of this chestnut brown head and body all the way through the belly, so it doesn't have the black belly of the black-bellied whistling-duck. Dark-backed, but it has these streaks, feathers right along the flanks that you can really see, especially in the left-hand photo. And those are distinctive of the Fulvous Whistling-Duck. Next quiz. Which one's the West Indian whistling-duck? whereas the other two have pretty broad distributions. Not surprising from its name, the West Indian whistling duck is endemic of the West Indies, and certainly a bird of strong conservation concern in the region. That's right, C's the West Indian whistling duck. And then over here, we can really see that black belly and red bill and prominent eye of the black-bellied whistling duck, and those side flanks that really stand out on the fulvous. So we'll move into a group of ducks called dabbling ducks. And these are a set of ducks that generally swim out in the open on a pond, and then to feed, they tip up. They stick their head straight down in the water and their rear end sticks straight up. This is Mallard. Males are very distinctive with this bright green head and a chestnut breast here. And again, we kind of look for the white on this, and the white on a mallard, you can usually see this white ring around the neck and white on the tail. Another thing about identifying ducks, especially when they're in flight, is we look at this pattern on the wing. And in a mallard, we have this bright blue, it's called a speculum, which is usually very iridescent, surrounded by two bands of white. And that's very distinctive for mallard. Blue-winged teal, again, let's look for the white. Where's the white on this bird? We have kind of this half moon white on the face in front of the eye, and this white patch under the tail on the males. Females can be very difficult to identify. They're plain, they have a general look of mallards. They have this, I don't know if you can see it, but they generally have a lighter patch right at the base of the bill. And if we're lucky, they're swimming with a male, so that makes them a lot easier to identify as well. When again in flight, this is a great illustration of blue-winged teal in flight. They have these bright blue patches on the forewing, and the speculum, I believe, if I remember right, is green. But it's generally very hard to see. But you really, when these birds are in flight, you generally see this very dusty blue color on the front of the wings as they fly by.
Hey, Jeff?
Yes.
I have a quick comment. So when these ducks arrive in the fall on migration, they are going to be in eclipse or hiding plumage, the males. So they will not be in their bright breeding plumage. And in fact, they look just like the females. So you might see a flock of ducks on the water that looks like all females, but there are males mixed in with them too, most likely. So just a heads up on that. During the winter and into the spring, the ducks will gradually molt into their breeding plumage. You'll be able to tell them apart. But when they first arrive and in the fall, they look the same.
Yeah, and they molt pretty quickly, don't they, in the fall in the West Indies?
Yeah, you can definitely, in the fall, they'll look like that. And as you get into December, January, you can start to see them molting into their breeding plumage.
Yeah.
And the schedules vary between the different species.
Yep. But if you see them in flight, regardless of, you'll definitely notice this beautiful blue patch on these. Thanks, Lisa. That's a good point. Here's a beautiful little duck that is much smaller than mallard and even smaller than the blue-winged teal that we just looked at. On this one, it's interesting. We have this bright, kind of, I would say, a chestnut head with this bright green swoosh that goes back behind the eye. Again, if we look for the white, we see they have this white finger up the side of the body and a buffy white under the tail. We'll see here this nice green patch. That's actually the speculum of the wings showing through, which gives us a sense that this one is actually a forward for me. Come on. Lisa, can you, this one's not forwarding for me. Can you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it just jumped ahead too. Let me, yeah, you clicked it a few times and now it's jumped ahead. Your
Sorry.
internet cut out a little bit.
Oh, it jumped ahead too?
It jumped
Mine's catching up.
too, yeah. I'm not touching anything. Do you want me to put it back? I think your internet cut out and and you clicked multiple times. Let me move it back and to where we were. Okay, so here we were, and let's go on to the next slide. So yes, green-winged teal. Are you with us? Uh-oh. Jeff's internet seems to have frozen, unfortunately. Okay, well, I can jump in until he comes back. So yes, this is the green-winged teal. Again, you can see the features of the white vertical bar on the front, the side near the breast. You can see the green speculum on the female, and then again, the green slash on the male's head. They have a beautiful cinnamon colored head. No worries, are you back?
I am back. Sorry, folks, I'm out in the boonies, and every once in a while it just drops.
Okay, no worries.
Did you cover everything on this one, Lisa?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. I need to request remote control again, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
There we go. There we go. So this next one, probably the first thing you'll notice, even though we are supposed to look for the white, probably the first thing you'll notice is that bill. It's just a massive spoon-shaped bill. Green head, very similar to a mallard, but unlike the mallard, which has a chestnut on the breast, this has a chestnut more on the flanks, and it has a white breast, and so it goes white, and then this big chestnut patch, and then white again behind the tail. This one's called the northern shoveler, aptly named for its bill. The wing pattern on this one is actually pretty similar to the blue-winged teal. It has this big blue patch on the front of the wings, but it has a strong white stripe behind it. But what's very distinctive about the shoveler in flight is that white on the breast really shows up against the very dark head, which sometimes can look black, especially in flight. So these are, even in flight, are pretty easy to separate, even from the blue-winged teal. Female, again, has a very brownish coloration, very similar to many of the other female ducks, but that bill just stands out. It's a massive, massive bill. Somebody posted the nickname for this bird is, I can't read the whole comment. I think Jessica was commenting.
Hollywood mallard.
The Hollywood mallard.
Yeah.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that.
And hunters call it spoony or spoonbill.
Yeah. So this is a bird that's year-round in the West Indies. It's a beautiful bird that I may let Lisa talk about a little bit. But again, let's look for the white on this duck, and we really see that white on the cheek coming down on the neck, and then this very white tail. There's this big bright red patch on the bill against the black bill, and it's beautiful spotting on the brown body. This is the white-cheeked pintail. In flight, you can see the wing pattern here has this green speculum surrounded by this nice tan color. And Lisa, did you want to comment on the most of the ducks we've gone through show pretty strong sexual dimorphism? In other words, the males and females look very different, but in the white-cheeked pintail, they're much more similar. And in this case, Lisa, feel free to jump in if I get something wrong here. But probably the biggest difference here is the color and maybe even the size of the red on the bill. On the left, we have this deeper red color on the bill, which is the male, and the female has a more orangish spot on the bill. And I don't know, Lisa, is there any other
Yeah, so
things
on
you want to
average,
mention?
sure, on average, males have bigger, brighter red bill spots than females. Females tend to be more orangey and smaller, but you can sometimes get bright females and dull males, and then males when they're young will look more like females. The other thing to look for is that males are slightly larger than females, their overall body size. They have slightly longer tails and slightly darker plumage. So they're very subtle differences, but if you just take a few minutes to look, you'll be able to see the difference between males and females. And if you watch a group of white-cheeked pintails, it's really obvious from their behavior, which are the males and which are the females. Only the males have courtship displays and a buzzing noise. They do a display called the burp, where they lift their head up and make a buzzing noise, bzz, bzz. And they also do down up courtship displays. And so if you see that behavior, you know those are males surrounding a female and courting her and trying to attract her as a mate.
And you study these for several years at least, right, Lisa? So
Right.
So if you have any other questions about the white-cheeked pintail, Lisa is the go-to.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, one of my favorite ducks. Duckologist.
So this is another North American migrant. So they generally appear in the West Indies in the winter. Again, let's look for the white on this. It has a white front of the neck and breast, and a white finger that goes up the back of the head like this on this chestnut head. So it has this long finger up the side of the neck, white neck and breast, and again this white patch followed by black on the tail. It's called the northern pintail, and it has this very long tail, as you can see, hence the name. And they're a little bit longer neck than most of the other ducks. So even in the female, which is this brownish head, kind of a more whitish breast, which you can often see in the field, that contrast between the head and the breast. And if they're swimming and have their necks up, you'll notice that both the male and female northern pintail have what looks to be a long neck compared to many of the other ducks that you see. It is dark green, or this green speculum with a white trailing edge on it when you see them in flight. But often in flight, you can even see that long tail. Really is distinctive for these northern pintails. Last couple ducks that we'll cover here are kind of similar looking. This duck has a very rounded grayish head, grayish body. And we look at this, we don't see much white at all on this duck. All we see is this very prominent black rump, both above and below the tail, with this grayish body and this rounded head. Female is very similar in shape, has this grayish body going a little bit to brown, or grayish head and breast going a little bit to brown in the body. But this is the Gadwall. And in flight, we do see white on these in flight. They have a very white patch on the speculum. So these are pretty distinctive, both in flight and on the water, especially the males. This is one of the ducks that we don't look for white. We look for where that big black patch is. Overall, the American Wigeon has that similar shape. It's a very rounded head, which it shares with the Gadwall. We look for the white on this one because we do see white on the males, especially when they're swimming. It has this white stripe over the head and this white patch right in front of the tail. Underneath the white forehead, it has this green swoosh, very similar to what we saw earlier in the green-winged teal. And interesting, these have almost a white bill. In flight, they also have a white patch on their wings, similar to the Gadwall that we were just looking at, but the white patch is in front of the secondaries, in front of the speculum, not a patch on the speculum. So the placement of the white on the wings in flight can also help distinguish American Wigeon from Gadwall. It was a while ago, but I'd mentioned dabbling ducks. So all of the ducks that we just went through generally do not dive underwater, but the next couple of ducks that we do generally feed by diving underwater. So you'll frequently see them when they're not resting, literally popping up and then diving back down to feed. So this is the ringneck duck. You might wonder why it's not called the ring-billed duck. And I'm not sure why they picked ringneck duck. I know that they do have a very faint brown ring around the base of the neck, but you can never see that in the field. It's something that you can really only see in the hand. So when you see these diving ducks, again, let's look for the white. It has this white finger up the side, big bright white sides all the way back, and a very black, dark wings and back on top of this white. And then this white ring around the bill is very distinctive. Even the females have a little bit of the white ring. Females have a white eye ring and a little bit of a white streak that comes off the eye towards the back. They also have that very similar pattern on the sides, though it's not white, it's a light brown with a very dark brown back and wings, and generally a very crisp line between the two. In flight, their wings are pretty plain. They have very dark coverts with a little bit lighter flight feathers, but they don't have any white patches or speculum or anything in flight on the ringneck duck. And one of the other things is this head shape is very distinctive. It almost has this crest coming off the back of the head. So if you see, even though you can't see any color or pattern, if you can see this head shape, you're pretty confident you're looking at a ringneck duck. Another diving duck that appears in the Caribbean is this one. Again, we look at the white. It's different from the last one we saw. It has pretty much a white side, but the white extends up onto the back and becomes this vermiculated pattern between white and dark feathers. But the light color goes all the way up onto the back. And it has this pretty solid colored bill. This is the lesser Scaup. And again, we can tell it from the ring neck, which also has that white pattern on the sides just by that lighter back. The head shape is very different. This is more rounded with a little bit of a peak here behind the head, and this kind of light gray bill with a dark nail on the end of the bill. There is another species from North America called greater Scaup that is very rare in the Caribbean. It has a different head shape. The head shape of the greater Scaup is more like a relaxed mallard. So if you see more of a rounded head shape, especially with that peak, we're definitely looking at a lesser Scaup. Again, greater Scaup is extremely rare in the West Indies. So I haven't seen one yet, but I know there are a few records. If we look at the female, we can also look at the white. They generally have this white patch around the base of the bill on the female lesser Scaup, and then other than that, they're a pretty even brown color. In flight, if you remember, the ringneck duck had all the flight feathers were pretty much the same color all the way across. With lesser Scaup, the secondary flight feathers have this big white patch. You can really see that in flight. And if you have a mixed flock of lesser Scaup and ringneck ducks, you can really pick out the difference just by that white patch on the Scaup, which you don't see on the ringneck ducks. A couple other diving ducks we have. These are called stiff tails, and you can really see why here in this picture on the right. If we look for the white, this just has a big white cheek with a very dark cap and a chestnut body. on the males, and they often have these bright blue bills, and they're often nicknamed bluebills or bluebill ducks. The females are pretty distinctive as well. They also have this dark cap and a single dark line that goes from the base of the bill back. So it has a dark cap and a single dark line on the face. Actually, let me go back quickly. The Ruddy Duck, also habitat-wise, it tends to like open water much more than the next duck, which is its close relative, which is the masked duck. It's another stiff tail, has these very stiff tails. Also this nice blue bill, but it lacks that white cheek that we were seeing in the Ruddy Duck on the males. And the females don't have one dark stripe. They actually have this a much littler cap and then two dark stripes, one right at the base of the eye and one further down. So the females have more facial stripes than the female Ruddy Duck. So if you only see a female, you can still identify them by the number of stripes on their face. So we got a lot of green here, but which one is the green-winged teal? Yeah, I think everybody's doing well. We can even look at the white on all of these. This one over here, A has the white on top of the head, and that's called the American Wigeon. It used to be called a bald pate in reference to the white across the pate of the head. Second one's a Mallard, has that white around the neck with chestnut below it and then whitish on the sides. Green-winged teal has that white finger up the side of its body. And then the big-billed northern shoveler has that white breast with a green head. Excellent. Now, which one of these is the lesser Scaup? Yes, that's right. The lesser Scaup has that whitish sides, and the white kind of creeps up onto the back in this a grayish color, in contrast to the ringneck duck, which has those bright white sides, white finger up the sides, and black back and wings. Now, the last set of ducks, we'll notice the bills on these are very different than all of the other ducks we've looked at. These are very long, slender bills, and if we had a really good look, we could see that there's serrations all along the bill. And that's because these Mergansers are fish eaters as opposed to plant and invertebrate eaters. So they use these long bills to catch fish. Pretty much all the ducks that we've covered so far, you would be restricted to freshwater, maybe brackish water for some of them. The red-breasted Merganser you can actually see in brackish and salt water as well as freshwater. Has this very shaggy looking crest, bright red long bill. Again, if we look for the white, it has white on the neck for the male, and then this white kind of stripe down the sides. Has this reddish streaked breast, but that bill really tells us that this is something different from everything else we've looked at. Female has this reddish brown head to a grayish body, and again, it has that long, slender, fish-eating bill that really stands out when you see these. The other Merganser that is sometimes seen, especially in the Greater Antilles, is a hooded Merganser. These just have this massive crest on both the males and females can raise and lower this massive crest. On a male, there's this just big white triangle on their head, and white, black, white, and then black on the breast, and this nice chestnut brown side. But again, they have these long, slender bills that are evolved for catching fish that They're very distinctive from the other duckbills. And these are pretty small. These are about the same size as green-winged teal, whereas the red-breasted merganser is almost twice as long, at least, as the hooded mergansers. Now we're going to switch out of the ducks and move into a couple of grebes. These are also diving birds. These are interesting because they can literally wet their feathers and stay underwater for significant lengths of time. The pied-billed grebe has this very distinctive bill. It's a light-colored bill with this black band across it. It's kind of this, I would say American football, but maybe rugby ball-shaped body with a little taller neck, but that bill really stands out. None of the ducks really have this short of a body compared to the head and neck. But once you see that bill, you'll immediately say, oh, this is a pied-billed grebe. And if it's swimming around with youngsters, which it often does in the West Indies, the youngsters have all of these stripes on the head and face that really stand out. One of the other grebes that is common in the West Indies, though it tends to hide in vegetation a little more than the pied-billed grebe, is the least grebe. Bill isn't quite as robust and chicken-like, I guess you would say, as the pied-billed grebe. And one of the key features for this, again, has that shorter football-shaped or rugby ball-shaped body, but this has a pretty gray, dark gray head with this bright yellow eye. So if you kind of see this short, stubby, dark bird diving and swimming in the water with a bright yellow eye, we can pretty much guarantee that it's least grebe. Move on to some of the gallinules. There are two gallinules that occur in the West Indies. There's the common gallinule, used to be called a common moorhen. On these birds, what you'll notice is this white streak down the side and this white streak under the tail. Generally stand out, and this bright red bill with a red shield that goes up onto the forehead and a yellow tip. And the body is pretty much this dark gray, slate gray with a little bit of a brownish mixed in on the back and wings. In contrast to the purple gallinule, which is a stunning bird with a purplish blue on the head that grades into a blue and then a bluish green and then even a dark green as you go from front to back on the purple gallinule. It does not have white on the sides like you will see on the moorhen or that bright undertail. The bills generally have the red with a yellow tip, but on a purple gallinule has this bright or this powder blue shield on the forehead, which is very different from the red shield that we see on the moorhens. Both of these birds are you'll see in fresh water. They especially the gallinule swims a good bit. The common gallinule, purple gallinule, spends more of its time walking on vegetation and lily pads, but both of them can be seen together in vegetated marshes and swamps. I hope that didn't blast people's ears too much. So that's the call of a common gallinule. You will often hear that in marshes, even though you don't see them, because they do spend a good bit of time back in the vegetation as well. So they're not always out in the open. This is another bird closely related to the gallinules. This is American coot. There's actually two morphs that occur in the West Indies. These birds are pretty much solid gray with this white bill. You'll notice on the bird on the upper right and the right that white bill goes right up on the forehead, this big white shield. That used to be known as the Caribbean coot. And then the bird on the left has a reddish patch up there as opposed to white all the way up on the shield. And that used to be known as the American coot. And today they're, based on research in the Caribbean, realized that there really are one species but just different morphs or gradations of how far the white extends up on the shield.
Say, Jeff,
Yes.
go back one. So
Yep.
the bird in the lower right is the Caribbean subspecies. The white goes all the way to the top. That bird on the upper right, it actually has
I guess it does.
red at the top of the white, and it doesn't go as far up on the head. So
You're absolutely right. I see that now as I look close. I should put my glasses on. But that's a perfect illustration. It kind of shows the gradation between the full Caribbean on the bottom right to a little bit of red on the shield to more red on what's called that frontal shield that we see on the bird on the left. Thanks, Lisa, for pointing that out. I totally missed that.
no problem.
I was going to switch over now to some of the other marsh birds that these generally don't swim. So they're more in shallow water and they really like to stay in the vegetation, the rails and crakes. This is a Sora. And I know I just said that these don't swim very often, but they do swim once in a while. They'll swim across open water to get from one vegetated region to another. So they know how to swim, but they only do it to move from one bit of land to another. This is called a Sora. It has this bright yellow, also a chicken-like bill, followed by a dark patch right behind the bill, kind of gray underneath, grading into these vertical bars on the sides, and brown on the back, which as it goes further back, many of the feathers are centered with a very dark brown. It can also show what appear to be fine white edging to many of the feathers that you can really see in the left-hand photo. You will mostly see them walking in very shallow water or on mud. They often will have their very short tail held vertically like you can see in the left-hand photo. But key characteristics on this are that bright yellow bill that's pretty thick and short, kind of dark behind it, and that grayish underneath and brown on top. And this is a Sora. I wish we had a recording of it. I would encourage everybody to maybe do a quick search of some of the resources that we'll show later on and listen to the call of the Sora. Because on bigger marshes and bigger wetlands, you'll often hear these, especially at dusk or early in the morning. This is a spotted rail. This is in the Greater Antilles, I believe, Caymans, Cuba, and Hispaniola. I don't think it's Puerto Rico. It's generally restricted to freshwater marshes. It's a very distinctive bird, especially on the left. If you see it out in the open, it almost looks like some long-necked, long-billed chicken. But it does have a very long bill, especially compared to the Sora that we were just looking at. His bill is bright yellow, a little bit of a red patch at the base, and then it's a very dark brown, almost black bird, just covered with white spots and white speckles. Really cool bird to see. The next one is clapper rail. This one actually inhabits more of brackish mangroves as opposed to strict freshwater. It's not really a freshwater rail, unlike the last two we just covered. Clapper rail also has this longer, slightly decurved bill, brownish gray head and breast, going into a gray or almost black and white barred sides. And again, it has a very similar pattern on the back with light brown feathers with dark brown centers. But you can easily separate this from Sora by that simply the bill shape and color. And these are much bigger birds, again, that usually don't see them out in the open like in the left hand. You often see them like is shown on the right, creeping around the roots of mangrove trees. And then the last rail we're going to talk about is the yellow-breasted crake. A cute little rail. As you can see from the bottom center photo how small this bird is. It has a bill that's a little bit longer than the Sora, but it's dark. Key features on this are that head pattern, this dark cap, white stripe above the eye, a dark line through the eye that it almost splits right at the eye and goes above and below the eye. A little bit of white throat. Very buffy, creamy underneath. It goes all the way from the bill, all the way under the belly. A little bit of hint of barring on the sides, but not nearly the same that we were seeing on some of the other rails. And then this very mixed pattern on the back of light tan feathers with very dark black, very dark brown, I think, and white streaks on the back. I agree. So cute, so tiny, and long legs. You can really see these long toes on this bird, especially. That's pretty distinctive of even the gallinules that we were talking about before, as well as the rails, adapted to walking on floating vegetation. Now we're going to switch over to seabirds. This is the last chunk of birds that we'll go through. I expect most people know what this one is. But we're going to move on. Basically, we classify seabirds as they spend much of their lives around the sea. They feed primarily on fish, invertebrates, mollusks. Most of them dive into the water for feeding, except for magnificent frigatebird. And they nest on rocky cays, cliffs, beaches, as well as mangrove forests. And what we're going to cover today are the ones that you might typically see from shore. First one here is the magnificent frigatebird. It's a very distinctive bird, very long forked tail, long, very strongly pointed wings. Males are pretty much all black. Whereas females have a black head and body and this white patch on the breast. Immatures have these white heads. So you can very easily distinguish male, female, and immature. Generally, they don't fly with this red, which is an inflatable sac. They generally don't fly with that open unless they're around the breeding colony. And that deflates and almost disappears in the throat. So you generally don't see that red when they're in flight. They also have these long hooked bills. An interesting thing about these birds is you'll never see them, or hopefully we'll never see them swimming or resting on the water. They don't have the natural oils in their feathers the way most other seabirds do. So if these birds actually get wet, they won't be able to fly. The feathers become soaked with water. So you'll see them either picking food from the top of the water as they fly by, or harassing other birds to try to get them to drop little fish that they've caught. So the frigatebird will steal it. Here's a picture of some birds at a colony. And in the upper left-hand corner, you really see a number of frigatebirds flying. It's a very distinctive flight shape. Dark bird with long pointy wings and a long tail. The next one we're going to talk about is the brown pelican. Pelicans are also very distinctive. That bill and the throat are unique among pelicans. There is one other species of pelican that sometimes occurs in the West Indies, but it's all white. So if you see a white bird with this kind of a big long bill and a throat sac, you'll know you're looking at a white pelican. But brown pelicans have this basically gray body and white to reddish and white on the neck. In the breeding season, they really show this reddish more. In the non-breeding season, they tend to have a little less coloration, but a very distinctive birds. Big webbed feet, They generally nest on mangroves in colonies as well. I'm going to get into some of the gulls, which is everybody's favorite birds. This is the laughing gull. Don't have a recording of it, but I'm sure many of you have heard them many times. Black legs are very, very dark, dark legs. The bill is very dark, but it is reddish, but almost appears black on the adult most of the time. And it has this black hood with these two white eye crescents. White underneath, pretty dark gray on the wings and mantle on the back, and then these black wingtips that stick out behind. Very distinctive, especially in the breeding season. In the non-breeding season, they might be a little more difficult, but they have this black bill and this dark spot behind the eye is pretty distinctive for laughing gull. And then these dark tips or darks on the primaries. So another bird that has a dark back, and this bird is a lesser blackback gull, has a darker gray back than the laughing gull, but still contrasts with the wingtips here that are truly black. So this is a very dark gray contrasting with the black wingtips. Lesser blackback gulls, some of the best things to look for is leg color. The leg color on these birds is yellow. Yellow bill with this red patch underneath. In the breeding season or in the summer, there is crisp white head, and underneath, again, going to this slate gray back and black wing tips. In the non-breeding season, they tend to get very dusky on the head. A lot of dark feathering streaks will appear on a lesser blackback gull in the winter, which is a good feature to pay attention to. And then for immatures, they have this kind of what almost looks like a stubby but all black bill, very whitish head, and whitish down to the neck and breast, and goes back into a darker brownish gray, and then these black wingtips. One thing about the lesser blackback gull also, as you get used to them, is they have very long wings. So these wings extend quite a ways past the tail. And we'll contrast that with the greater blackback gull. Here's an immature greater blackback, also has that whitish head, whiter, even lesser blackback, but very whitish head. These have this massive dark bills, just looks more robust than lesser blackback gull. White underneath, grading to a speckly brown, but their wingtips are much shorter. Especially you can see it on this photo on the left. The wingtips of the greater blackback just are not nearly as long. Their wings are just much shorter than lesser blackback. During breeding and non-breeding season, the great blackback gull pretty much stays, the adults stay white, so they don't get that dusky look that we were seeing on the lesser blackback gull. And the back and the wings are almost exactly the same shade on the gray blackback gull. So the gray blackback gull has a much darker mantle, or a darker mantle than the lesser blackback, and it has these pink legs as opposed to yellow legs that you would see on the lesser blackback gull. So they're two that can be really, really tough to tell apart. If you see them together, I just saw a chat come by about size difference. The great blackback gull is substantially bigger, noticeably bigger. So if you see two dark-backed gulls together and there's a significant size difference, then you probably have one. You'd have one of each species there. Herring gull is very, the gray on the back is even lighter than the laughing gull. Definitely much lighter than the last two gulls we looked at, the two blackback gulls, and contrasts very heavily with the black wingtips. Other than that, it's a white gull, white head all the way back to the white tail, yellow bill with the reddish tip as an adult, and kind of these grayish legs. So the key here is that gray back contrasting significantly with the wingtips. In non-breeding season, the adults get very dusky, very streak-headed, even more so than lesser black-backed gulls. But again, that back color would easily separate the two. And then juveniles are just range from, they have a dark bill and brown. And highly variable on how much streaking you see in a juvenile herring gull and how much spotting you might see on the back. But they don't have that light-headed look that you would see in the lesser black-backed gull or even greater black-backed gull on the immatures. And that strong contrasting with they still have the black wingtips compared with the brown coverts and wings. The other one that can be difficult to separate from herring gull unless they're together is the ring-billed gull. One key feature here is that ring around the bill as opposed to that red spot on a breeding adult. So ring-billed gulls have this ring around the bill. They also have these bright yellow legs compared to the pink legs of a herring gull. They also have the back color is very similar between the two, and they still have the black wingtips. So really kind of focus on the bill, the leg color. If they're together, the size is substantially different. Ring-bill is quite a bit smaller than herring gull. Ring-billed gulls, I'd say, are about the same size as laughing gull, whereas herring gull and lesser black-backed gulls are about the same size. And then the greater black-backed gull is much bigger than the rest of them. Jump into some terns. For terns, some of the best things to look for is bill color and leg color, if you can see it. And if they're standing relaxed, wing length is a good thing to look for. And then in flight, how dark or patterns of dark on the wing. But for royal tern, they have these bright orange bills, very distinctive. No other tern in the West Indies is going to have these big orange bills. They're pretty much restricted to saltwater, not exclusively, but they are saltwater, beach, and ocean birds. And they're the largest of the terns that we're going to cover today. The next one is a roseate tern. You'll really notice in this picture over here a couple things. Dark bills is black cap that extends way down the back, but they look very white. They're a very white looking bird. You don't really see any dark on the wings, at least in this view. And one thing you'll notice, especially on this bird on the right-hand side, is how long the tail is. The tail extends way past the wingtips. So roseate tern is a very long-tailed bird and a very white bird. It's most similar to the common tern, which I'll cover next. But one thing that you'll see is there's no dark on the tail at all of a roseate tern. It's a very white belly, white wings, just a little bit of dark on the outer primaries of the wingtips. The bills can range from this red base and a black tip to almost all black on a roseate tern, and they have these red feet. The next one is a common tern. Common tern differences from roseate can have very similar bill pattern, black to red with a black tip. But what you'll notice here is a couple things. Common terns actually have a gray belly. This is not completely shadow. That's actually some of the color on this bird. They have a gray as opposed to that gleaming white belly that you see in roseate terns. You'll also see this dark on the trailing edge, contrasts with the white in the wing on a common tern, and it's just has a lot more black on the wing than you would ever see in a roseate tern. And the tail is much shorter. So when you see a common tern sitting, the wingtips and the tail are about the same length. But really look for that contrasting. One of the key features is that dark on the trailing edge of the wing And the amount of dark you see in the wings here on both of these photos compared to almost the pure white that you see on a roseate. One other thing I did want to mention, common terns pretty much only nest in the West Indies, all the way down in the ABC Islands, whereas roseate terns nest pretty broadly throughout the region. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Least terns are the small ones. They're the little ones you often see on the beach. It's these bright yellow bills. Again, they're very, very small terns, quite a bit smaller than common and roseates even. They have this white forehead that you can see on this black cap, and this black goes all the way to the bill with that white above it. Gray wings and back with white body. Distinctive features, though, are really that forehead pattern, the yellow bill, yellow legs, and the very small size. We'll jump next to another one. Anybody know what this one is? Put it in chat. Yeah, seeing the right ones go by. This is a sandwich tern. Sandwich terns have a very distinctive bill color. They're black bills with a yellow tip. The yellow tip can be very small. And in breeding season, they have this full cap. In non-breeding season, they have this black patch kind of behind the eye. They have dark on most of the primaries, not to the same extent that you would see in a common tern. But these are actually bigger common tern in size between common and royal. But really the key bit on this is white tail, fairly short white tail, and this bill pattern is a little bit more robust on the bill with this yellow tip. And then gull-billed tern, aptly named, it has a very short, stout black bill. It's traditional gray, like most terns, gray-backed, white everywhere. In the breeding season, it doesn't have that dark patch that we were seeing on many of the other terns. It just has this dark smudginess behind the eye. But or not breeding season, sorry. In breeding season, though, it has this dark cap like most of the other birds, but it's a shorter, stouter tern with this big bill. And that bill is really probably the key feature to look for on a gull-billed tern. This one is pretty distinctive. So you'll often see these in flocks on the beach. And it's one of my favorites too, Natalia. Skimmers are awesome. Not only are they striking to look at, but their behavior is incredible. They have these very black wing tops on the top of the head all the way back, and then white underneath. So when you see them sitting on the beach, they're just these black and white birds, very distinctive. And they have these big red bills with black tip. And the lower mandible of the bill is actually substantially longer. And they use that to slice through the water, and they're actually trying to feel and catch fish. So they will feel a fish near the surface and then snap it up, and away they go. And to me, this photo on the right is absolutely amazing. It shows you how thin that bill actually is. It allows it to cut through the water just like a razor. Very distinctive, very beautiful bird. Mostly restricted to salt water, but not completely. Will go into brackish and even freshwater to feed. These ones are probably the toughest ones we're going to talk about. Lisa and I were chatting about it earlier today, the subtleties of trying to separate the two cormorants. Generally, you will see cormorants either sitting up on some structure, like the birds on the right, swimming, like this immature at the bottom, and they will even swim underwater. And sometimes as they're swimming along, you'll see the head pop up before the body pops up. It's really kind of interesting. They also don't have good oil in their wings. Part of it is because they spend a lot of their time underwater. So you'll often see them spread winged in the sun trying to dry their feathers. So the birds on the left are all double-crested cormorants. They have, during the breeding season, they have these white plumes behind the eye, kind of yellowish throat patch. Juveniles also have that yellowish kind of throat patch, but a lighter body as opposed to adults, which are almost all glossy black. On the right-hand side, you'll see the neotropic cormorant, which looks very, very similar to the double-crested. One of the differences, especially in the breeding season, to note is this white right at the base of the fleshy part of the throat and mouth. It also has a little bit of a longer tail. So if you happen to see them together or you've looked at them quite a bit, you'll notice that the tail on the neotropic cormorant is much longer. It's a more slender bird than the double-crested cormorant, but most of those features are pretty subtle. Probably in the breeding season, you really want to look for this white on the throat compared to the just yellow. And during the non-breeding season, one of the best ways to tell them apart is really the angle of this throat patch, which is very hard to see on these pictures. And often, for me anyway, it's something very hard for me to see in the field. I almost have to take a photograph of it and then look at the photographs. The neotropic cormorant has a much sharper angle there on the throat patch than the double-crested cormorant. It's a very subtle difference, and in many cases, I would probably just say I saw a cormorant species as opposed to trying to identify them, unless it's in the breeding season, or unless I get a really good look and really can see that has that much more slender body, longer tail, or if I have a photo that really shows the head well. These are a challenge, but that makes it fun, right? And that was the last bird I wanted to cover. Later this week, we're going to talk about shorebirds, which is the other big set of water birds that are fun and challenging to identify. Thursday, same time, but 2 days from now. Go ahead and register. If you can't make it, I think Lisa and crew will be sending out a link to the recorded webinar. Should be fun. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about a couple of helpful resources that people can use. To the left here is an application called Merlin that you can download to your phone. It has both photo identification. So if you can take a photo with your phone, even through binoculars or a telescope, Merlin will offer suggestions on what it thinks that is. And there's also a pretty extensive bird identification or field guide, you'd almost say, with photographs, sound recordings. So I would encourage everybody to download Merlin. It's a really great resource for helping identify not only water birds, but all birds throughout the West Indies. I did want to mention Birds of the World. It's an online encyclopedia covering identification and life history of all of the birds of the world, with an agreement between Cornell and BirdsCaribbean. BirdsCaribbean members get free access to that. So I would encourage everybody to, if you're not already a member of BirdsCaribbean, go ahead and join. And as one of the perks, you'll get free access to Birds of the World. And then on the right, Herb Raphael recently published an updated version of Birds of the West Indies, a great field guide for the entire region. And I think this is the last slide. Resources and useful links. We'll be sharing all of these as well, Lisa, if I recall. But if you want to jot any down, now's the time. I think we were then going to open this up to Q&A. Is that right, Lisa?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we have all your email addresses, those of you who registered, and we'll also, we'll send you the link to the YouTube recording so you can watch that at your leisure, share it with other people and so forth. Let me just stop sharing my screen, start my video. And yeah, we're happy to answer some questions. So just monitoring the Q&A and she'll pose the questions for Jeff.
Yeah, we have a few questions lined up for you, Jeff. One question was, how can the little egret be appearing in the Eastern Caribbean? Does it migrate there? Is it increasing in numbers? What's the little egret's range?
What's its story?
Yeah.
So little egret is from Europe and Africa.
Mhm.
So it probably was a vagrant or set of vagrants that were pushed over into the Eastern Caribbean. And there was enough of them that they actually started breeding.
Wow.
So, and they've very, very slowly been expanding through the Lesser Antilles. Probably maybe that original event plus, new birds getting blown off course every year or two. And like I said, they're just slowly increasing and expanding. But I think it's going to be a while before they arrive on Jamaica, and
Okay.
even a lot longer before they arrive in New York. But they are slowly increasing, and an interesting addition to the West Indies birds.
I haven't seen one there yet. Another question is, so many of these birds had beautiful colors in their breeding plumage. So generally, how long is the breeding time for these birds? And many of the ducks are migratory. And so sort of, can we see these beautiful breeding plumages in our birds, and for how long when they're visiting?
Right. So Lisa mentioned, especially for the ducks, that the males, especially during their tail end of the breeding season, and they molt and look very similar to the females. But I think some of them might even arrive in breeding plumage, but not many. But as she said, I think November, December, you really start to see the breeding plumage of the ducks. And that lasts then until they migrate back north for all of the migrants. I don't know. For herons and egrets, I'm sort of guessing a little bit, but I think it's a several month long breeding season.
Okay, great.
If that answers. And Birds of the World would be a great resource to dive into that deeper.
It would.
Yeah.
Another question is, this is limpkin specific. So are limpkins declining in numbers, and what's their favorite habitat? Where would you normally find a limpkin?
So they're generally in large marshes.
Mm-hmm.
With vegetation, either cattails or said, some sort of rushes. As far as they're declining, I believe they are, but I would have to actually look that up to see what the true numbers are around their status. They occur. They have a very broad range. Not only in the West Indies, they occur from Florida all the way down, I think, all the way to South America.
Oh.
So they have a pretty broad range. But generally open marshes, not so much wooded, but they can be in wooded marshes too. I shouldn't say that. But definitely not open water. And generally, like I said, cattails, rushes is where I seem to see them most.
Great, thank you. Another question is, why did the common moorhen change to common gallinule?
Oh, that is a good question, and one that you'd have to ask the taxonomists. Frankly, I think that one's a confusing one, and I think it's still confusing to me even as to it seems to be we switch back and forth every 10 years or so, but I'm hoping it will settle down and we'll stick with either moorhen or gallinule, one or the other.
Okay, so higher powers are in charge of that one.
Yes, yes.
And one more question from our Q&A is, someone asked, on the great blue heron, it appeared that there was something that looked like a spur. Do they have spurs?
No.
Perhaps it
I mean,
was.
are we talking about spurs on the wing, spurs on the leg?
Oh, good question. They didn't specify. I immediately thought of leg, but
right. Yeah. So no, they don't have what I would call spurs.
Okay, maybe it was
I mean,
like the hallux claw or the backwards.
Right. Which I guess maybe technically you'd call them a spur, but it doesn't. That's not how I would. I guess I wouldn't. Obviously, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. So. One more question: are most Caribbean ducks migratory?
Yeah, most of the species are North American migrants. Many of them nest in what's called the prairie potholes region, kind of central US and Canada, all the way up to the Arctic, and then migrate down to the Caribbean and other wintering areas. So yeah, most are migratory. The whistling ducks are less migratory, as well, and West Indian whistling duck isn't, though they have a tendency to be a little more nomadic, I might say. Same with the black-bellied whistling-duck, and then the white-cheeked pintail is resident. Ruddy duck and masked duck are both residents in the West Indies. But most of the dabbling, what I went through, the dabbling and diving ducks, most of those are migratory. A good question.
Thank you. So our great blue heron question confirmed spur on the wing and not the foot. So maybe it was just some plumage that looked like a spur.
Yeah, it may have been some feather that was sticking out or something.
Yeah. Someone did ask what of the Whimbrel, which is a great question because we are covering all of the shorebirds the day after tomorrow, Thursday, at the same time. So tune in. What of the Whimbrel? What of the spotted sandpiper? What of the yellow legs? We'll learn all about them with Jeff on Thursday afternoon. Hope you can join. Someone also asked, do all grebes run on water? So I think we've seen some like David Attenborough nature shows. I assume is what they're referring to as these courtship displays of grebes that stand up and run together. So do they all do that?
No. The Western grebe is probably the most famous example of that in the Western Hemisphere. Which is a Western North America bird. But no, the smaller grebes, I don't believe. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember offhand what their courtship display is, but it's not. I don't think it's the same as the Attenborough really cool ones that run on the water. And looks like Julian Moore tossed in. The courtship display is amazing. So we should try to track down a video.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen the courtship of the pied-billed grebe. But one thing we always noticed, both in North America and in the Caribbean, is you rarely see grebes fly. And we used to joke that they don't fly, they don't migrate, they just burrow in the mud and hibernate for the winter up north because you never see them fly. So they're just always on the water, diving and swimming around.
That's fun.
Yeah.
We have another question. What about shearwaters and petrels? That's a great question. This is sort of a two-part answer. One is that we were just talking earlier this afternoon about how it would be really great to have a seabird specific webinar. So look for that in the future. But also this webinar specifically was geared towards those participating in the Caribbean Waterbird Census right now, and mostly birds that you can see from shore. And while sometimes you can see shearwaters and petrels from shore, they're not as common as the gulls and terns. So we didn't cover them today, but we still think they're amazing.
Well, I think that does it for Q&A. Thank you to everybody for joining us for this webinar. It was quite a session. We covered a lot, but I hope it was helpful and you learned something. Thank you, Jeff, for this awesome presentation. We really appreciate it. And be sure to join us on Thursday because we are going to get into it with shorebirds, everybody's favorite group. I used to really be afraid of shorebirds, but I've grown to love them. They are fun and beautiful and interesting, but also one of the hardest groups of birds to tell apart. All those blasted sandpipers that look alike and so forth. So be sure to join it for that one. Don't be afraid of shorebirds, Natalia. Come on, you're good now.
I'm still afraid of shorebirds.
I know, I know. They are challenging, but we're going to have a lot of fun with them on Thursday. You'll get some really great ID tips, stuff that we have picked up and scribbled on our field notebooks and ID and field guides for years. So be sure to register for that and tune in either on Zoom or on Facebook. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We'll be in touch. We'll send you a link to the webinar and a link to some different resources that'll help you with your learning your Waterbird ID and participating in the census. So everybody have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.